Hi, my name is Michael Egan. I teach in the history department here at McMaster and am playfully running this McMaster rolling seminar on Vie Velo, which is designed in a variety of ways to talk about bikes and cycling, both in a historical and cultural and urban planning perspective, but also hopefully to start and open up a conversation about how we can engage with bicycles at McMaster in ways of thinking of sort of turning a conversation towards talking about McMaster as Bike U, as a model for university campuses to be talking about not just bike riding, but bike use and bike safety, and promoting a larger culture of cycling and bicycles. Last week, Evan Weiss, the bike snob, was here, and this week it is a real pleasure and joy, actually, to be able to sit down and have a chat with and introduce to you Strack, who is a very close friend of mine, although we've only really been in the same time zone for 36 hours?
Something like that.
So, Frank is the founder of the Velominati. If you're not familiar with the website, velominati.com is, and I'll let Frank describe it and introduce it properly in a moment, but is the home of the rules, and obeying the rules in road cycling especially. There's a wonderful balance on the site between taking cycling and the experience of the sport and riding oneself with a very healthy sense of humor at the same time, which I think is a really nice sort of balance. We're going to sort of have a wide-ranging conversation. The format for this series, rather than asking people to give a formal talk, is to have an open-ended sort of conversational interview that I hope will actually include you as well. We'll sort of get the ball rolling, but would invite you to jump in as things go along. Can I get a show, just out of curiosity? I mean, I don't want to sort of cover ground that we don't need to cover, but at the same time, it's probably the sensible starting place. Is anyone familiar with velominati.com and the site, or a few, but not? You've heard of it? Okay.
Passing interest.
Well, maybe we can start there from. Rather than my sort of trying to explain what I think it is, what do you think it is?
I think it's a community, first and foremost, I suppose. But it's, yeah, the rules are, they don't have really anything to do about actually being a better cyclist or going faster or being stronger. You can do that with a coach, or you can figure that out on your own. But the rules are really about kind of the tradition and the history of the sport and the culture and the way people do things as cyclists. And a lot of it's tongue-in-cheek, and a lot of it's really rooted in history and ultimately wearing spandex and trying to look fantastic and shaving your legs and thinking that that's a cool thing to do, and maybe justifying some of them and maybe not justifying the others, but trying to have a good time, and ultimately cycling is a really hard sport, and you do it in a lot of different kinds of weather, and it's really hard to keep your motivation up. And I think kind of the core goal of the rules is to help people have more fun with cycling and see it in an enjoyable light and try to find motivation to get out and ride your bike, which is always the number one goal.
We have this, one of the themes behind this semester's series, and we're still working on what we'll do in the winter, but it's been thinking about looking for ways to think about the bicycle not as a transportation technology, but as a communication technology. So the Bike Snob last week talking about using his blog and books as a way of sort of communicating information. And in November we'll talk about coffee and cycling, the place at the cafe, a physical place where that happens. But I mean, it's this notion of a community that I think is really exciting about Velominati. That we're what, three and a half years into, or even a bit longer. But
June 2009, I think, is when we launched it.
Yeah. Okay, so we're just over the 3-year-old mark, but we were talking last night. It's a commonly visited site.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we get a lot of traffic. Oh, I think we get a lot of traffic. It's not huge amounts of traffic.
Yeah. It's more than modest, though. I mean, it's not just sort of a...
Yeah, about 300,000 people a month. So. Yeah. And a lot of people, it's interesting that we really try to open things up to the community and have conversations about things, and most of my ideas are pretty harebrained, and so we like to invite people to come in and point that out and maybe agree with me and start an argument or but have an open discussion, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do is encourage more and more people to participate in the conversation, because you see that traffic that we've got on the site, but there's a relatively small number of people that actually comment on the site and participating in the conversation. And, I don't know why that is, but that's always one of the goals.
Well, what's the format like? I mean, this isn't sort of a straight blog. I mean,
it's not a blog. Don't call it a blog.
Well, I'm not calling it a blog, but I'm just sorry you were talking about sort of comments and things like that. I mean, this is sort of almost, again, not right to call it like a webzine, but I mean, there are new stories or new sort of essays that sort of come up every, 4 or 5 times a week. 3, 4
yeah, every other day except for on weekends. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got the rules are kind of the one of the pillars of the site. It's kind of a way that people find us and discover us. Hopefully, it's not what keeps people around. Hopefully, the writing, because we write a lot, keeps people coming back. And we talk about different aspects. We have different series that we write in, like Vie Velo, which is we made up this word, by the way, Illuminati. It's loosely based around the Illuminati, the Renaissance kind of secret society. And we just made it up, and so Velominatus is an individual who is a disciple of cycling, so we're just making a kind of a quasi-religious kind of thing out of this. And yeah, so we have La Vie Velominatus, which is the life of a cyclist, and Look Pro is always a popular series, and that's really has a lot more to do with looking cool than it does with doing anything. If you're going backwards, that's fine as long as you look fantastic. So, which happened to a few of us today.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So why don't you have a reverse signal on your bike when you put it in?
Well, I assume sort of
helpful.
when the hill goes uphill, it's harder work. And
you only use it going downhill.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. Anyhow, so we have these different things, and banter like this happens a lot on the site, hopefully. But yeah, so we have the articles, and then we also have the lexicon, and so we make up all these crazy terms all the time, and whenever one of them sticks, we try to put it into the lexicon. And phrases like casually deliberate, which is kind of like, have you guys all seen Star Wars, I take it? What generation is this? Is Star Wars still important to this generation? Because it was important to mine. So, but like Chewbacca's driving the shuttle by the Star Destroyer, and Han Solo is like, fly casual, but don't look like you're flying casual. So that's what casually deliberate basically means, is like always looking like this is just one of a million different times that you've been on a bike and you're not trying, but you're absolutely perfect and amazing. So casually deliberate is don't look like you're trying, but definitely try. So
maybe we can talk a little bit about the rules. And I had we prepared a slideshow over lunch, which would have been fantastic and looked very pro, but for the fact that I failed to bring a projector to the room. So I mean, without sounding overly sort of strange and awkward about it, do you have some favorite rules? Or I mean, there's some central sort of pivotal rules that we could talk about, and then we could talk about some just sort of examples that sort of hit the broader scope.
Sure, I like all of them. I think my favorite rule is Rule 9, which is riding in bad weather makes you a badass, and that really comes down to finding a way to make riding in rain and snow and when you're really pretty miserable fun. And there's pleasure to be taken in the fact that nobody else is coming out on that day, right? If you're wheeling your bike out and it's pouring rain and everybody's giving you a weird sideways look for going out and riding your bike, that's something to be proud of. And so yeah, I've always loved riding in the rain, and plus the Belgians do it all the time, and the Belgians look really awesome. So put on my Belgian clothes and go out on my bike. What's that?
I say they don't have the choice.
Yeah, they don't have the. I live in Seattle. I don't have the choice either.
So yeah,
my rain bike gets ridden more than the good weather bike. Let's put it that way.
Any others? I mean, that's,
yeah. So Rule 10 is about climbing. It's a famous quote by Greg LeMond. Somebody asked him once, at what point does cycling start to get easier? Because this person obviously had been on a bike and realized that they get out of breath one day, especially when they go uphill. And he said, well, it never gets easier, you're just going to go faster, right? And so that's always a good thing to remember as a cyclist. It's never going to, when we say we feel great as a cyclist, it means that we're ready to throw up one of our lungs, but not the second one. You know, so it's all relative. That's another good one.
The second one will come out in an hour's time.
Yeah, right. You're saving that one for the second half.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Rule 5.
Rule 5 is a good one. Harden the fuck up. Yeah, that's. My dad never phrased it that way, but I was raised that way. You know, from being a kid, Nordic skiing in northern Minnesota, go out and way below 0 Fahrenheit skiing, and complain. Complaining isn't going to make anything any easier. Just go out and do it.
Well, this is, I mean, and maybe we can use Rule 5 as a segue here as well. So I think one of the things that has become a more, I don't know, maybe it's not an intentional thing, but it seems to be a more intentional feature of the site over, I'm thinking over the last sort of 5 or 6 months, where there being more and more stories that seem to sort of point to the notion that La Vie Velo that you're talking about, sort of this life and this experience on the bike, that so much of it can be applied to life off the bike as well.
Oh, yeah.
I just, a series of sort of more recent rules, but also just sort of the, and I don't want to sort of aggrandize this and sort of say this is a larger philosophy of life or something, but there is an element of that. I mean, there's a practice off the bike, but there's also, and it's got less to do with looking fantastic off the bike perhaps, and more to do with sort of being, following sort of a set of rules or experiences that are, I don't know if that's deliberate or intentional.
No, it is deliberate. It's a great point. Not that I'm trying to teach a philosophy lesson.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, I think life is really complicated, and it's really hard to do things right in life. I don't know. I make mistakes. I don't know about you guys, but
we're Canadian, so no, we're not good. Carry on.
It's hard to hear you talk when your head bounces around like that. But it's life is complicated, and sport is pretty simple. You go out, you get on your bike, and you ride it, and you get better. And you go to a hill, and you know exactly what that hill is like, and you go and you ride it, and you practice, and you get better, and you push through something. You go out and you ride in the rain. You come home, and you feel proud of yourself that you did it. These are all really simplified lessons for life, I think. And so, yeah, my life as an athlete has helped me in the rest of my life, because you can say, man, I can't make any progress at work or at school. I'm really struggling with these things that I'm doing in life, and it's hard to get everything lined up to do it right. And going out and riding your bike is a simple thing, and a lot of those lessons, I think, because it's a simple model, apply to the more complicated model of life. So certainly. Yeah.
And lots of stories. I mean, one of the fascinating features of this website is the way, this community really has evolved an awful lot over the last several years, but in addition to the Velominati as an extension of the Illuminati, you've started running, or not running, because you've sort of thrown your hands up and said, I've got nothing to do with people dying on the roads, but there's sort of been the extension of Coggles as well. So instead of the Cabal, we've had Coggles, which is bringing together of this mysterious online community and a bunch of strangers meeting at a preordained time and place to start some kind of a ridiculously long or painful ride in the company of strangers, people they've never ridden with, and in many cases, people driving or traveling long distances to do that.
Yeah. So we wanted to start having kind of a more physical community aspect of it, and I think anybody who's gone to a Coggle will tell you that it's like internet dating, right? Like, you've got all these people that you've known online and that have said that they're coming, and then you show up at a cafe or something, and you're like, really? Is that you? Oh, really? Okay, you're who? And then they introduce themselves with their own name, but their screen name is something else, and you don't really know which name you're supposed to use, and there are all these really interesting aspects of this. But it's been great to meet people, and I think the most incredible thing about the Coggles is that not one douchebag has shown up yet. Not one jerk has appeared. So it seems like the community is maybe self-selecting for roadies who aren't quite such tools, because I think roadies really have a deserved reputation for being jerks. There's one guy emailed me that he's been riding with this group ride every Thursday for 4 months, and nobody has said a word to him other than hello. It's like, that's not very welcoming. He's wondering, is this what road rides are like, or should I just tough this out? I'm like, no, you shouldn't tough this out. You should go find a group of people that aren't assholes. So I think it's amazing that we've got these rides that we set up, and every single person has a good sense of humor. Every single person loves riding their bike, different skills and classifications of riders, but that doesn't matter. You know, it's all about getting out and having a great day on the bike together as, you know, as people that enjoy that life.
How did that happen? 'Cause, I mean, the internet's full of trolls.
Yeah.
And cycling sites are full of trolls. And you know, there are a couple that appear on the site occasionally, but I mean, there's never been a point where heavy editing or heavy sort of controls seem to be, maybe I'm speaking out of turn because it's not something I have to worry about. But I mean, it seems to me that, I mean, there is this sort of very sort of genuine appreciation or recognition of what that community is, and it shifts in terms of identity a little bit. I mean, there's a fair bit of latitude there.
I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Yeah.
There is we do some moderation.
Right.
You know, every once in a while you get it, but it's usually slap on the wrist kind of stuff. But yeah, it's amazing. You know, if you get an account, you can upload any photo directly up to the site. It doesn't have to get approved or anything like that. And like, I think almost no penises have shown up. You know, it's like, you know, it's amazing. We open it way up, and people respect it and behave well for the most part. And there's occasionally you get a really narcissistic person that likes to kind of take over, and then there's some wrist slapping. But for the most part, yeah, I think it must just, for some reason, and I don't know why that is, because I see it from a completely different perspective than you guys might, but it must be self-selecting for people who aren't jerks.
And obviously, I mean, the overriding message behind the site is get out and ride the bike. I mean, as much as we should adhere to the rules, and I want to come back and talk about, it's not just the rules themselves, but obeying them, and that's on the shoulder, and would be on the screen behind us had I had the good sense to bring a projector down. And there are all kinds of rule breaches right there, which I don't care to count at the moment. But it's all about the bike. Rule 4.
Yeah, Rule 4.
It's all about the bike, but I mean, get out and ride is sort of a big feature of this. So there's a certain irony on some level that there are a lot of it's a community largely of grown men. And I want to talk about the gender stuff in a little bit, so we can circle back there. But at the same time, who aren't riding their bikes because they're busy sort of contributing comments on a website. But there's the notion that, I mean, cycling is a big part of their leisure time in a variety of different ways.
But I think I want to qualify that it's all about the bike anyway, because you're right, the bike kind of as a representative tool of the lifestyle as one component is definitely true. It's something that we're thinking about all the time. But it's also it's all about the bike, but it's not about which bike you've got. It doesn't mean that you have to have a fantastic bike or some crazy lightweight. You're looking at me like I've got two heads. Some crazy lightweight bike, you know. But take care of your bike and get whatever bike you can, but ride a bike and respect your bike and love your bike. And it doesn't matter if you are out riding a rusted steel bike somewhere and are getting out and enjoying the sport. Buying a carbon fiber bike isn't going to make you enjoy it necessarily anymore or be a better cyclist. That's going to come from you practicing it and riding the bike. And you know, I think the actual bike itself is less significant. I've got a range of bikes at home, you know, carbon fiber, and then I've got steel bikes, and one's really kind of old and archaic, and one is really modern, and they're all fun to ride. And you know, one makes you maybe go a little bit faster or a little bit slower, but the enjoyment's the same, and that's kind of what it's always about. It's just enjoying the ride.
It's important to know, and I think it probably happened out of earshot, but there was a ride this morning with Michael Pierce came from Toronto, and Roger Kim gets the gold star and carbon emissions bad prize.
Yeah, this is not a carbon neutral ride.
But the four of us went out for a brief ride this morning to show off some of the roads and scenery here around Hamilton and things. And Michael and I were both sort of commenting off the front at one point that we spent endless hours knowing that sort of this keeper, wise sage monk Frank was coming. You know, this bike could, you know, rule
Jackass.
59, Principle Asylum, where's the...
60, always follow the principle. Yeah, I can't remember which one that is.
But the bike needs to be silent. And it was one of these ones that I'd read years ago, and anytime you hear a little bit of a click on the bike, even on my bike I commute to work on, it ruins the entire experience. So thanks very much for that, starters. But we were both sort of, you know, we'd been, you know, suffering over just making sure the bike was just so, that, you know, that Franck wouldn't sort of, give this sort of sideways, like, again,
You had to be reprimanded today.
And I did have to be reprimanded today. So I had a bit of a squeaky skewer, and I insist it had a lot to do with just making sure that Franck knew I was there. So on the one hand, it was a safety thing, but also to break his own will as the sound got louder and louder as I sort of caught up and then passed him on hills, which happened a lot. Anyway, we'll leave that be. But this is the fun of the site. I mean, this is the banter that, again, there's this strange notion that what Franck doesn't know is that his road bike is currently available on Craigslist. Student out the back, now they separated from it, hawking it on the side. But I mean, there is this. I mean, use this as a segue, because I think on some level there's not just with the site, but I think in sort of road cycling especially, in terms of the different forms of cycling, there's an element of sort of trust and faith that you put into your fellow cyclists. In many ways, I think on the road you're more at risk from traffic, but also just sort of self-induced collisions than you might be in other disciplines of cycling. That I think, for me anyway, makes the
self-induced and fast.
And fast, absolutely. But this notion of sort of, again, bringing together real-world strangers, if you like, but with a passion for sharing a similar experience in the same place.
Right. Yeah, that was apparent. We do a cycling tour in Belgium on the cobblestones, and these cobblestones are not like the cobblestones you might have somewhere here in Montreal or something like that. This is basically like somebody who really hates cyclists took a couple of boulders and threw them at weird angles and distances down this path.
Well, Chris Horner describes it as a helicopter just dropping boulders from the sky, and then we have to ride over them.
And then you ride over them as fast as you can.
As fast as you can. Yeah.
But it's more bumpy than anything. I'm a longtime mountain biker. Thought this would be no issue. It's not. It's more bumpy than you've ever experienced anything in your life to be. And your hands are on the tops of the handlebars, and there's no way you're ever going to move your hands anywhere else, right? At least not until you get more used to this. The guide, of course, we hit the sectors, and he's got one hand on the bars, and he's looking behind us to make sure the whole group's together. And but we're all like glued to our bars. And you're in a group of people.
Any change of momentum, and I will die.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're thinking you're going to die even without a change of momentum. You just think you're going to die. You're just trying to keep it at bay a little longer. But you're in a group of people that flew from all over the world, New Zealand, Australia, UK, United States, all over. You've never ridden with them ever before, and now you're on cobblestones, like sitting behind some guy who has never been on cobblestones ever before, and now you're going downhill and there's a turn, So you quickly, the trust fall comes to mind pretty quickly, That's a good thing.
One of the other. And we sort of stress, again, it's not necessarily about racing. It's about looking pro rather than being pro. So fewer blood transfusions.
Too much for that.
But I mean, at the same time, there is a rigid sort of discipline around improving on the bike at the same time. Not to be a better or faster racer, but there's something about for those of you who haven't ridden on a road bike, something I think intrinsically addictive and about just sort of the simplicity of the rhythm when you hit it right. And a term that you and I share is, or really both are infatuated with this notion of la volupté, which Jean Bobet talks about and others, that this notion of just sort of flying. It becomes effortless. And we've talked a little bit about sort of searching for that moment, and it's a magical one because it never happens, or very rarely happens, or you feel it's just around the corner. But it's something, for me anyway, rather, in addition to just sort of, well, I'd like to be fitter, healthier, faster, taller, better looking, all these things. But there's that notion of just that search for that 5 minutes of magical riding. We went for a ride today, which included sort of going through Mineral Springs, just up behind Ancaster and Dundas. And there's, for those of you who know the roads, or the Sulphur Springs Road, as you come through Mineral Rings, there's sort of that almost a horseshoe kind of steep turn. And that's my regular 45-minute ride before I come to campus to teach most mornings. And the whole day is predicated on how I manage that turn. whether I came into it well, but also whether I got out of it well, how I changed gears, whether I changed gears, whether I stayed on my side of the road, all these things, all sort of factors, whether I got hit by a car. But I mean, they're all part of sort of the writing experience. Is that search for almost, I don't want to call it the impossible, but I mean, there is that element of that magical moment that sort of
the voluptuous moment on the bike.
Yeah.
So there's two things. There's La Volupta, and then there's, is that how you pronounce that? You said it differently than I did, but you're Canadian.
For the French, well, being familiar with the French language.
Does that? I don't.
Well, no. I mean, I think it's an excellent figure on the E. So I think it's La Volupta.
Okay. So,
or Volupta, but yeah.
And then there's the man with the hammer, and the man with the hammer,
who we see a lot more frequently.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes you deliberately go to meet him, but the man with the hammer is this mythical guy in the sport of cycling who, basically, you're coming along, you're feeling great, and he'll hit you on the head, and you'll like turn into somebody who's pedaling squares, and you're going backwards, and you're having just an awful time, right? It's actually probably a sugar bonk, a sugar knock, but. That's the man with the hammer, and like the opposite to that is La Volupta. And so I actually think that La Volupta is his wife.
Nice. There's a short story in there. That was very well done. This is why we do informal conversation. These stuff happens.
But anyway, so these two aspects of cycling are like the two things that you kind of try to avoid meeting the man with the hammer, although sometimes you do it deliberately just to get yourself into better shape. Right. But you're always kind of going out in pursuit of like that perfect moment on the bike where you have, because you always hurt. You're always suffering, and I say when we feel good, we're still hurting, but there are a few moments occasionally when you don't feel anything, and you're just going fast, and
But you also have to become aware that you become fast. I mean, there are times where you're on the bike and you sort of realize, I have no recollection of where I've been the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, which is not once you realize that it's over. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I just sort of think that you're sort of going through time. Well, for me, Jerseyville Road, which we haven't ridden, but I mean, it can be sort of 5 minutes long, or it can be sort of an hour and a half long. And I just, but I just sort of think that it's not about sort of being buried in the experience, but sort of being almost above it. That is the. Yeah. I'm trying to sort of make a distinction there.
I had it this summer at the Seattle Cobble, and there was this ridge, and we had it was a hard climb to get up to the top of the ridge, and we were 150K into the ride or something like that, and all of us are tired, and you've gotten to this point now where you're tired and you're riding with this weight in your legs that. Yeah, they feel kind of heavy, but they kind of feel powerful too, right? Like you've kind of broken through this little barrier, and it was misty up on top of the ridge, and the group was up there, and we rode along there, and I was on the front of the group, and my head was down, and yeah, it was like floating. And we just went all along this ridge, and like I found out at a certain point, I was pushing the go button on my shifter to try to shift one more gear, but I was at the end of my cassette, and and I was just like, that was the moment I kind of came out of it. But that was a total La Volupta moment. Felt nothing, and I was just kind of going through this dreamland, and yeah, like a dream, you kind of snap out of it at a certain point. It's kind of like the moment, like right before you fall asleep when you're floating.
Stephen Miller, he references the term of someone with perfect cadence, perfect pedal. What does he say?
He does have a term for that.
I've just forgotten the term. It's a French term. Basically, it means someone with a perfect pedal.
He doesn't talk about souplesse, does he? I mean,
he's got a.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
The word that describes that, a good supple stroke is souplesse, but he uses a different word. I know what word you're talking about.
Gymnastique to the language.
What's that?
Gymnastique and the language.
Yeah, right. That's right. We can sort that out this evening. Incidentally, I failed to mention, but we're doing this sort of on a much more informal and casual level at 8 o'clock this evening at Cafe Domestique in Douglas. Well, the slides will work.
Flip-flops and Bermuda shorts.
Well, no, but there will be beer and less sitting down and more sort of engaging and chatting and things. But we might talk a little bit about the Belgian tour and a little bit about the rules. But yeah, the projector works, so maybe it's more professional and it'll look more fantastic than what I've fumbled to do here. But But yeah, I mean, well, and this is part of the lexicon as well. I mean, volupté is in it, man with the hammer is in it, souplesse is in it, along with then lots of fun. We haven't actually talked about the pro scene, which is sort of this funny kind of medium where, I mean, pro cycling sort of gets an awful lot of negative attention in sort of the mainstream media, but at the same time is one of the very few, increasingly try as they might, international sports that really sort of captivates the entire globe in different ways, shapes, and forms. Obviously with the Tour de France, but the pro calendar makes a point of visiting at this point every continent short of Antarctica, right? I mean, so not in Latin America anymore either.
Right.
Tour, but even in Latin America.
Oh.
We're north of the United States, so we're with you in North America. Okay, sorry.
Thanks for the lesson.
Yeah, no problem. But again, sort of this looking fabulous, and this is something that fantastic has a lot to do with sort of, again, studying what the pros, the people who do this for a living and do it exceptionally well, just take for granted. And there's an element of fun in trying to sort of emulate that rather than just doing it oneself. But
yeah, that kind of stems out of this notion that a lot of people get a sense that they're going to lose their identity if they copy somebody else. And I've always thought that copying somebody who's better at something than me is a really good place to start. So I've never had any issue just going out and skiing and cycling, whatever, always just basically try to mimic whatever somebody who's faster than me. And the pros are all faster than me. So I pay a lot of attention to the pros, and that's what the Look Pro series is about. And it's usually kind of tongue-in-cheek, but there's definitely some truth to, these guys do it all the time. And women, they do it all the time, and whatever they're doing is probably for a reason. It might not be. So you need to have some sensibility about some of these things because they're just as superstitious and idiotic as we are. But for the most part, they kind of know what they're doing, and it certainly seems to work for them. So ideally, you'd also pick one of the faster pros, but you can pick one of the slower ones if they look better. That's fine. But I've used that model a lot.
Are you superstitious as a cyclist?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. How so?
Well, as a cyclist, I have to inflate my rear tire first, and then the front. I'm pretty sure that my bicycle would fall apart if I did that in a different direction. Cyclists in general are pretty superstitious. Race number 13 is a really bad thing to get. So anytime a racer gets number 13, you pin it on upside down. That's one thing to do. I used to, as a skier, any important race was only done in one set of lenses that I kept aside for important races because those were the lucky lenses. Things like that, yeah.
Well, you mentioned the tires in order, and one of the more recent pieces of
LCD.
I'm not a dog, well, I am a dog. No, but one of the more recent pieces on the site that resonated with me was sort of this whole notion of ritual, which you mentioned inflating the tires. You also mentioned sort of right shoe on before left shoe and things like that. But one of the things, I think the other feature that's interesting to me is how the entire riding experience is. I mean, we've talked about sort of the looking for this magical moment on the bike, just the joy of riding, but just the reflective manner, the intent behind every feature of the riding experience, which isn't just when you're in the saddle turning pedals, but has an awful lot to do with the preparation for. So in many respects, if I ride in the morning, my bike ride begins with making the cup of tea and the eggs for breakfast and sort of thinking about the route beforehand. And I never thought about it until I was actually looking at that piece, realizing that even a 45-minute ride becomes sort of a 2-hour ordeal. Ordeal's the wrong word, perhaps. But in terms of sort of reflecting on how that routine and that ritual sort of develops, both intentionally and unintentionally, over how the ride comes together.
Yeah, and it brought up the good question about ritual and process, and what was the other? Yeah, ritual, process, and superstition. I think, and how those three things are related. Because I think there might be somebody might just have a process, and they're like, well, I do this, and I do that, and I do that, and I do this. But ritual has to do with attaching some more mystical meaning to it, and then superstition, I think, is just insanity. There's no possible justification for it, right? You're just like, well, if I put my left shoe on first, I'm going to fall. That's not really based on fact. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, hasn't been empirically disproven yet either.
That's true. This is true. Yeah.
Just thinking out loud.
Yeah. And I'm not going to be the test monkey either, so I'm going to keep putting my shoes on the way I've been doing it. So.
Well, and you also sort of talked about, again, sort of emulating the pros, and there are a few rules, I mean, where, again, an element of tongue-in-cheek is, well, I mean, there's serious rules, but I mean, sort of tongue-in-cheek, and you sort of said, we don't know why the pros are doing this. So Rule 37 with the handlebars of the glasses going outside the helmet frame rather than inside, for example. It's that one that for quite a while sort of said, we don't know why the pros do it, but they do, and you should too.
Yeah.
And similarly with the lining up the tires on wheels, that the label should be lined up with the valve stem.
People have come up with good explanations for both of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, they are rational, but I mean, again, for the outsider sort of observing, and this is what I find fascinating about the site, but also then the entry point into watching pro racing is precisely this notion of, here's a running theme through the pro world. I wonder why it's like that, without then having sort of some, well, here's why.
Yeah.
And they have evolved. So the labels, it makes it much easier for a mechanic to find the puncture in the wheel based on knowing where the starting point is, sort of, 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock.
Yep. And they'll have a label right over the valve stem so you can read the label for the pressure and things like that.
Yeah.
So what's the rationale then for the eyeglass straps that are in there?
I've always thought that try it. I just think it's uncomfortable. But the rationale appears to be that when you crash, your shades will come off rather than stay
It's
put.
where the Wiki stamp is, the Jiro stamp.
What's that? That's where
That's where the sponsor's name is.
That's
the
cynical response. But yeah, there's probably a lot to that.
Probably true.
Yeah.
The Oakleys have them at a different spot. The Oakleys, you'll see it whether they're under or above. But
On your
that's a good
wrist.
point. What's that?
Oakley's off
Yeah, there's one right there
So
too.
the big O is right in the temple. So
Yeah,
it
right.
would never be covered with straps.
Yeah. So.
Aesthetics.
It
Well,
just
this is
looks
a big
funny.
part
If you
of
say
the
it,
site.
you look ridiculous.
Yeah.
There should be more than a good enough reason for anyone. It looks idiotic.
So there does seem to be, obviously there's a practical element to a lot of the rules in that sense. But again, I mean, John, you just mentioned aesthetics, and aesthetics plays a big role as well. So shorts must be black.
They should be, yeah.
We can't wear other color shorts. Why not?
Well, look at the Polish picture.
That's right.
The Polish team, go Google Polish cycling team if you don't know. Perfectly good explanation for why you don't wear red shorts. Let's put it that way. Especially if you're a man.
There's a famous photo of Cancellara like that too.
Yeah. Mapai, was he at Mapai?
No, it was after the Worlds. He was winning the Swiss outfit, which is mostly white, of course.
Oh, good lord. I haven't seen that one, thankfully.
If we choose to wear non-black shorts, bring a pair of socks.
What's that?
Only if you're a man.
So, but the reason that we prefer black shorts really ultimately is because up until 2000, all the shorts were always black. It just looked really cool, and that's one of the things is the championship jersey should be worn with team shorts, not matching, strip. It was really cool in the earlier times. You'd have a world champion on the team, and they would just be wearing all the same kit, except for they had this beautiful jersey that they got to wear. It's a nod to history that's the way that we've always done it. But it's also just a classy look. They're not really trying to make themselves stand out really ridiculously. They're just wearing the jersey and being relatively subtle about it. Hopefully, letting their legs do the talking instead of this crazy color coordinated bike and all that stuff.
I feel somewhat professionally obliged to emphasize sort of the nod to history here, but it's something we haven't talked about in terms of the site, that there is an awful lot of, when we talk about sort of looking like the pros and sort of trying to, it's not as though it's an emulation of just sort of the modern contemporary scene. I mean, the real icons and heroes on the site, many of them aren't cycling anymore. In fact, I would wager the majority of them aren't actually professionally active anymore. They're long retired or long departed. Yeah. How does the heritage of cycling fit into both the Pro Scene website and just sort of the sense of your cycling world and community? And
where does it? I think it's a hugely important component of the whole thing. I don't know exactly where it fits in, but it flavors everything. I think I'm kind of a traditional person when I look at things like that, and I think the sport definitely has proven itself to be very traditional, and so I think it's very fitting to understand where these things come from and to pay attention to what was done in the 60s and 70s and 80s and how it was done. You know, they certainly, watching the races that Eddie Merckx was in Foster Copy, you know, we talk about how hard the climbs are that we're on, like in the Tour de France, that they're going over these huge mountain passes and it's so hard. Well, it is, but they were doing it on a 29-pound bike, and they were doing it with 6 gears, and the smallest chainring they had was a 42, and the smallest cog they had, or the biggest cog they had, was a 23, and it was a dirt road, and they just got on with it and did it, and they looked fantastic doing it. So yeah, I think history, I don't know how you classify history and its significance, but it's all around us and it colors everything that we do, so I think it's important to pay attention to.
Is there a golden age or a favorite period of cycling for you, or just?
No, I think people consider the golden age to be the 50s, but I would disagree. I don't know. For me, I guess my golden age is 1990 when Greg LeMond was in the rainbow jersey and had the Scott drop-ins, and that was the moment of ultimate cool as far as I'm concerned with cycling. But I think it has to do with when you got into the sport and you know, what moment you started identifying yourself as a cyclist and what was happening then. I think we admire the age of Eddie Merckx and of Foster Copy and so forth, but I don't know that there's a golden age. Maybe it's right now. Probably not. Well, actually, now I think give that 1 second of consideration.
that clearly came off the top of your head too. You did better earlier with that.
Maybe after October 15th.
Yeah, right,
Once the
exactly.
season's over, yeah.
I think one aspect of the website and the community in general that might get lost is while you keep referring to looking pro, looking fantastic, that there really are no dollar signs associated with it. That like take for instance our ride out this morning. I mean, I would say that was a fantastic ride. We weren't talking about wheels or the newest frame or who had the newest shoes. We were talking about the surroundings that we got to share together. So I think it's more about either real being fantastic, looking fantastic, feeling fantastic than saying I think we'll purchase fantastic.
And that's absolutely right. And you can buy all the, and same thing with a suit and, you know, anything that you ever buy. You can go buy the latest, greatest, newest stuff and put it on, and if you don't believe in it and you don't pull it off, then it's, you know, it's all false. You're gonna have a lot more fun riding in something that you like, that you can afford, than going out and always being obsessed about buying the latest and greatest of anything. So you're absolutely right. I think some people commented on your new bike during the ride and admired it, but yeah, the ride is cycling is about being out and being with friends and enjoying yourself. It's not about having the greatest and the latest and greatest and most expensive thing. You know?
Yeah, on a personal level, I mean, I think the other flip side, or the extension of the other part of that conversation or the comment has a lot to do with, you know, I'm a transplant from the West Coast, and I still think of the West Coast as being very much home. I miss Vancouver, I miss the rain, I even miss the rain, but you know, Ontario hasn't worked for me, but the discovery of riding and getting out of the city and out of sort of the QEW corridor has transformed my relationship with my surroundings. Yes, I ride to work, yes, I ride on a practical level, but it's sort of that leisure element where I can sort of, you know, if I can find or fit in sort of 3 or 4 hours for a ride, you can get up around, you know, through Milton, through Guelph, and all kinds of things and back here in ways that, you know, back roads that just sort of transform your image of this, you know, urban and industrial corridor in exciting kinds of ways. So, and then also, I mean, again, for a ride like today, being able to play host on some level and sort of saying, these are my roads, you know, welcome. I hope you like them, which is also sort of a nice feature of the larger sense of community too. But
yeah, and you experience it a lot better because we drove around yesterday too,
right.
Which was lovely. But doing it on a bike, you experience it in a totally different way, and it's a lot more fun. And you realize you drive up. They drove us up the climb for the Hamilton World Championship road race in 2003, and yeah, you know, it looks like it might be a hard climb, but we went up some climbs that I'm very sure were a hard climb today, you know, because we did it on the bike.
I don't
Appreciate it. And you know, that's it's a great way to experience any environment, absolutely, and you can go a long ways. You know, it's not like walking or running where you're kind of restricted by how far you can get out. You can go out, get on your bike in the morning, and go do a ride, and you can pull out a globe and you can see it on the globe, you know, the distance that you went riding, which I think is a really cool thing to say, you know, I went from there to there.
Well, there was a moment today too where we're up on top of the escarpment and you're kind of looking down, you can see the lake, and because it's fall and the clothes are out, it's gorgeous. And you know, if people kind of think about a city like Hamilton, often what the images you get are kind of the industrial, you know, the shots from the lake where all you can see is the flame and the factories and the foundries. But there is so much more to a city like this and to the environment around it. Right. And cycling is a really easy way to see your city in a different light, to change your perspective.
Actually, the bike snob who was here last week blogged on Monday, but we sent him on a mountain bike ride on Friday, and he went up the escarpment, up and did sort of a peaks ride and saw Webster's Falls and Hughes Falls. And on his website, he sent a photograph of sort of looking down through the valley and up the escarpment the other side, and in, you know, his inimitable, snarky sort of way, decided to turn it into an inspirational poster, which at the bottom reads, "Your life sucks." There's an element of, you know, the flip side is, no, this is where we, you know, this is where we live, and it does clearly transform and color that precisely that relationship with what is otherwise, you know. I mean, I think that Hamilton in particular gets an unfair negative reputation through sort of the province and things, when there is, from an urban sort of cultural perspective, an awful lot of exciting things going on, but also getting out of the city and through the city, there are some really exciting and beautiful features of it, which I think, you know, and not just on a road bike, but I mean, I think this is the magic of the bicycle, is someone's actually, bless you, in that environment, or more centrally in it than sort of behind the glass in a car or something. It really sort of, and this is the other thing, we sort of talked about the World Championship.
I want to add something to that real quick.
Yeah, please.
I think, not to diminish Ontario, but I think anybody with a bike can probably, with a little bit of effort, find in their local community, however much they hate it,
no question,
can find a similar photo, you know, that says your life sucks, because, you know, you see your community and your environment in such a different way. I live in Seattle. I live maybe a half a kilometer from Woodland Park Zoo. I've never been in that park. I've lived there for 6 years, and I got a cross bike, and I went out into that park just to try it, and there's like 15K of single track in it, and it's like, what? I had no idea that, and it's I can throw a rock and hit this park, and it's amazing, you know, and you just.
I think that's the irony of cycling, though, is that we put so much effort into distancing ourselves from what's the monotonous. And like when Frank and I jumped onto that little bike path right behind home, we jumped on, like, could you imagine waking up every morning and riding to work on this?
Yeah.
And you know, everyone always takes a different perspective on it, but I think when you're cycling, you can always hit the refresh, the restart button, and every day starts off raining for you.
I'll send you a picture of that, my ride to work, and your life sucks too, right? But you sort of mentioned the experience of sort of driving up Queen Street, up the escarpment, which was part of the 2003 World Championship course. And it seemed like an interesting hill that you were in a car, as opposed to some of the hills we did today, or what have you. And it's another feature for me that's interesting about cycling, is that element of work. We talked a little bit about why do I ride, and for me, I mean, I think there's that element of sort of not just the physical challenge, but the physical experience associated with being a fairly sedentary academic. My job involves sitting often at a desk or standing for brief moments in front of students and talking at them. But I mean, I don't use my body for, you know, for work. And that the nature, sort of the pain, the difficulty, just the sensation of sort of lungs burning, legs burning, there's an element of feeling more alive with that, with the bicycle as well. It's not the only way to do that. There are endless numbers of ways, but I'm wondering to what extent that, I mean, there's been an explosion of popularity in the amateur sort of road riding, sort of cycling experience, not just in North America, but especially in North America. Whether there's an element of that at play, just looking for something one can feel without sounding too cliched or lame about it.
Well, I think riding a bike is a good way to if you're after hurting yourself, it's an efficient way to do it. You know, so that's a good start. But I think that comes back to the.
I'm not talking about crashing and sort of, oh, hey, cement, but I mean,
right. Which also is a good, effective way to do it.
That's probably even faster sometimes. Yeah.
But I think it comes back to what we were talking about a little earlier about life lessons. Sport's a really simple environment in which you can kind of feel progress and feel productive and feel good about something. You know, if things aren't really going your way, you can get out on the bike and hurt yourself just to prove that you can do it, or you go out and you get on a bike and just prove that you can have a nice relaxing afternoon. You know, there's any kind of different. Thank you. Thank you. You know, it's just a very easy way to make yourself feel productive or good, or find whatever it is that you need to have. And I don't think cycling gives you any one thing. I think cycling gives you a whole bunch of different things, and that's one of the cool things about it.
I open the floor. Is anyone? Yeah, John.
Talk about the difference between appreciating things in a car and riding. No one in a car ever appreciated the term false flat.
Yeah.
There's nothing in riding. It was slightly uphill.
Yeah, but you know what?
Headwind.
No, it's not.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Since you know, at the same time, since I've been riding around here more regularly and on heavier levels, I see the potholes that the car won't even notice, but I'll still sort of steer around. You know, I sort of impose sort of my cycling mentality in the car driving at the same time.
The best is when I notice that I'm pointing out a pothole while I'm driving.
Slowing down.
Even this morning, you know, we're riding along, and it's the expansion joints, right?
Yeah.
But in a car, those are just like, you hear them, but you don't feel them. But on a bicycle, it's bang, bang, bang every time, and especially in the north where they're necessary. You know, it's a different experience of what the roads really feel like.
Well, you know, and not to play overly academic-y, but in my field in environmental history, we talk about ways of knowing nature through work. It's not just about sort of scientific knowledge, but actually getting your hands dirty with something. You know, it involves a certain degree of coming into closer connection with your environs, and yeah, certainly on a bike there is that element of, again, not just the visual, but yeah,
When you ride through the forest today, you can smell the leaves. Like, you don't get any of that.
right.
You know, you can smell the leaves, you can feel the sun on your skin, you can feel the wind in your hair, even if you're wearing a helmet.
You can feel the humidity,
Yeah.
stifling humidity.
Which is nothing compared to the summer.
The English fellow that was here last week, who pointed out that, you know, he's all, instead of renting a car or taking cabs, things like that, he buys a bike. And what a great way to experience a city and a new place, and you sense it in a completely different way than you just driving around.
Well, there's a book about that by these are the Talking Heads, David Byrne.
Bicycle Diaries.
Yeah, the Bicycle Diaries. And I actually got that for my birthday this past year. And it's a phenomenal book. And it's not really about cycling, although it is. But it's mostly about his kind of travels around the world and the way in which the bike changes the way in which you experience any given city. He goes to Rio, Chicago, New York, somewhere in the Middle East for a variety of things. He's doing a variety of things, music and visual arts and all these other things. But he talks about his experience in each city that he visits through riding through those cities. And it's a really interesting book. And for that reason, that the riding through the cities changes your perspective on how you see them. And he posits in the book that it's actually easier to experience a city with a bicycle than it is in any other way. Because you can get through a lot of the city because the bicycle is such an efficient mode of transportation. And you're exposed to everything. Right? It's right there. There's no medium through which you're perceiving the rest of your environment.
I love the concept of that book. I couldn't stand reading it, but I love the message and what you're talking about. And that's not a racing bike. You know, that's just any old bike that you can pedal. Whatever you can get your hands on, get on it and start riding around town, and it's incredible. Absolutely.
But I like his idea, the Englishman, that you know, you don't travel with your bike. You know, rise in the city, and the first thing he sets up to do is to buy some old clunker or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And or some basic bike, and then sell it at the end, or just hand it to somebody and say, "Hey, you want a bike?"
What's the catch?
Well, if you're Igor Kank, there is a catch.
Yeah, that's true. Where else do we take this? Yeah, Megan.
To change tax quite a bit, Dr. Egan and I were discussing.
Dr. Egan, who's that?
I want to go steam pump.
But the perhaps intentional increase of trying to bring more women onto the site. And I was wondering if you could comment on how that's been going, or perhaps your competitive pool that you'd set up with female riders.
Right. Yeah, so, well, that's one of the, my wife is an active cyclist, very good cyclist, you know, and it's always a shame to see, cycling I think is in general a pretty male-dominated sport, and there's certainly, it seems like on our site for sure, it's dominated mostly by men. Although, it's amazing, I get a lot of emails from women, so there's definitely a lurking community of women that are following. And there are several people that just through interchanges I've discovered are women who you'd never know are women on the site. So there's a larger profile of women than you would think.
I've heard that one. What was it?
Well, the name is like Jelly Bean. You know, you have no idea that that's if it's a man or a woman, and it's hard to tell from saying things whether or not they are. It's really important to me that we get more women involved in the community and get more women on these group rides. We had some yesterday, which was fantastic. But for the most part, yeah, I'm not sure what it is, and I haven't gotten my mind around how we are more inclusive towards women in the community. One thing that we started is we have the season-long Humanities Super Prestige, which is based on an old season-long series that the pro racers were doing, where they collected points for every race. So we have a pool, and people put in their picks for who they think is going to win a certain race. And we, as a way to start paying more attention to women's racing, we added all the important events from the women's calendar into that series. And there was some, to be honest, there was a lot of moaning and groaning from some of the kind of the stereotypical men who just pay attention to men's sports, saying, well, I don't know who to pick, I don't know any of the women that are racing. And at the end of the season, now we kind of know a lot of the women racers. And I was guilty of that too. There's not a lot of coverage for the women's racing, and you have to go look for it to get it, right? And so putting these pools together, you're like, man, well, if I want my points, I better go do some research. And then you've got people watching the women's Olympic road race was by far the best cycling event of the entire Olympics. And all of us were watching it, you know, we had a pool for it, and it was fantastic. And so I hope, you know,
It was more exciting than men's race. That's
way better, yeah. But I think in general in cycling, women are totally underrepresented. The calendar is much shorter. There are fewer events.
The money's
not there. You know, it's a shame, and I think hopefully if we start having some of these types of events and more women are participating and more men are paying attention to the women's races, more money will come into it, and it'll gain some traction.
I thought your response was really kind of interesting when that sort of initial reticence sort of started at the beginning of the season, and you warned people, look, we're going to expand the Super Prestige to include the women's races, and there was a bit of groaning and things, but sort of that, I mean, it sort of came around to sort of say, well, look, if we were actually students of cycling and following sort of pro racing and things like that, we've created sort of a really curious kind of division as to what's acceptable racing, what's acceptable cycling, and it behooves us to continue to learn rather than to limit that kind of perspective as well, which I think sort of the groaning sort of stopped, you know, on a rhetorical level anyway. There's sort of the suggestion that no, this is part of what we do.
Yeah, yeah, and you have to. Why won't we pick one event?
Right.
Study all the aspects of it, you know, men's and women's, but also mountain biking and cyclocross. Or
I think
maybe not triathlons, but
yeah. Just actually, I'll go to that point. But just to, I think part of it is the gender inequality comes from the long-term historical nature of cycling, whereby that gender inequality has been maintained through sponsors, through the racing environment. A good friend of mine who just turned 33 last week and has managed to build his entire life around his bicycle and never actually formally worked more than 2 weeks of the year.
it's an interesting model.
Yeah,
I need to learn more about this model.
Yeah. It's worked well for him. But not last year. Yeah, last year he was living in Girona in Spain with a girl who was racing on the Garmin team, you know, as a pro, and would typically come in, if not on the podium, certainly top 10. her yearly salary is $26,000 a year.
Yeah. I mean, and
that's
an
what
order of magnitude, several orders of magnitude higher than the men's.
He folded the women's team so that he could bring in Thomas Dekker onto the team. So the entire women's team was eliminated so they had enough money to pay for one guy.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible.
Versus triathlon, which is a much newer sport, has always been based on gender equality. So every single pro race out there, the men's purse and the women's purse has always been identical.
Well, it wasn't
That's great
forever, but it certainly is now. But a better sport, I think, to talk about with regard to tradition and the fact that there has always been sort of a level of gender inequality is tennis. Because what the WTA and the Men's Tennis Associations have done is that they've made equal prize money for the men and women at all of the major events. So all of the big five tennis events, the Aussie Open, the US Open, Wimbledon, the French Open, so or whatever, they all have equal prize money for men and women. And there was a lot of griping about that because, for example, the men play 5 sets in the majors and the women play 3. But what the prize money equality has done is it's driven more traffic and more people to watch women's tennis. And as a result, we now have more sponsors who are interested and there's much more money being generated. And one of the ideas that Vaughters had, and I certainly recognize this kind of some issues in terms of gender equality in cycling, but Vaughters said, look, instead of separating the men's and women's tours so that the women's tour has to generate all of this interest in its own, why not just pair them up and have a women's event on the same day, on the same course, and using the same everything, all the same infrastructure as the men's. And then you just have the coverage start 2 hours earlier, you have the women's race and the men's race.
So did you do that for Flanders?
Yeah, a lot of those. So when we went to see Flanders, the women's race was.
And I like that.
But it's a great idea. It would be so easy, and it would drive so much traffic, and the sponsors would come because it's easy. Right?
Yeah.
It's an easy add-on, and it doesn't cost you that much extra, and there's not that much extra logistics involved in doing. The roads are closed anyway.
Right.
What's the difference?
Yeah. For a team owner, it's make good business sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Yeah.
I'd like to see the UCI require the highest level of whatever that is, Pro Tour level. That if you're there, you also have women's.
But that would be so easy for the UCI to just say, if you're going to run a men's race, you must run a women's race. And it would change the sport, and it would change women's involvement in the sport overnight.
Now you're asking the UCI to be productive, and that's never going to happen.
Maybe if Kimmage gets his way, they might be.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things actually that Megan and I have spoken about on the gender issue, and it circles back to the site as well, is sort of the element of looking fantastic in terms of kit and gear available to men versus women. Just on an amateur, just in your local bike store kind of approach is drastically different. That women cycling friends I have sort of will complain that they can't find anything that's not pink or floral or that there is a very limited pool of stock as opposed to the men's cycling where there are endless new kinds of shorts, jerseys.
Different kinds of cuts of jerseys.
Exactly.
It's more about how they market it too, that the media image and the way it's constructed is like, oh, men are supposed to be on bikes. That's how it goes. And the model names of bike, Defy and all these powerful names, and women's bike models are Flirt and Cruise and all these things, and it's like,
and here's your flowery jersey.
And when you go into a bike store or a bike shop, they see that you're a woman, and they're like, oh, well, here you go, come to this section of our 3 bikes, and do you want pink, white, or purple, and do you want butterflies or not butterflies, and there's no real distinction that you can be a woman and an athlete, and that you maybe don't need this specific woman gear, that you can just you don't have like a woman car that you can just get in on your tool and wear whatever you want and just go.
Such a great point.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, you've got the pink card, it's all curvy and it's whatever. You just get on and ride. There's not this expectation that women are supposed to be on bikes. It's like.
And there's been a huge amount of misunderstanding about.
Some of that's not fit too. 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 Some of that's not fit t
Well, I was just going to say, there's a huge misunderstanding about fitting a woman to a bike because.
And there's a big misnomer about women's fit. It's like women are like radically proportionally different. It's like, well, not that.
Some of them are.
Some are, but so are some.
But so are some men.
Roger and I have a slightly different physique, but we still ride men's bikes, right? Roger and I, totally different. And it's really not any different than you are. And Michelle rides men's bikes, she always has. She rides her Cervelo with a 13 centimeter stem, just like Tom Bonin does, you know? I mean, it's...
Because Tom Bonin does.
Well, she would throw me out by my hair if Tom Bonin showed up.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I can't come up with any compelling argument not to. You know, there's no need to have women's geometry, shorter top tubes, and then they're pushing out the steer so that you've got weird angles and you can't handle the bike anymore. And they've been kludging women's bikes, smaller wheels. It's all insane, you know.
And it's more about men designing bikes that they think women like or need. I don't think it's women, you know, demanding the big bike manufacturers like, none of your bikes fit me at all. Make me something that will work. I think it's a marketing scheme that men think women want or that they need.
It's easy. That's the thing. It's easy because it's always been done that way, and it's just a throwback to the '60s when we just put these two in different categories. Like my wife would fit much better on a men's bike than I do because she has nice long legs, relatively short torso. And I'm the other way around. I have a long torso and short legs. So for me, finding fit is hard. For her, it needs to snap. And it's ridiculous that, you know, women's bikes, it's
But it's also part of the larger conversation that women are an afterthought in the cycling community. That it's here, well, like you were saying, you know, it's a
If
very
they were an
idea,
afterthought, though, it would only be men's bikes. They were, you know, small frames or small or whatever like that.
but it's an afterthought in that there's, you know, 17 men's models and 2 women's models, and it's, you know, well,
There's a bit of there's a tension here, isn't there? I mean, I mean, obviously, you know, bike companies, many of whom are struggling already, are sort of trying to work out what the bottom line is. And yes, market to women, but on a smaller scale. On the suggestion that women aren't buying enough of the bikes to justify a broader scale or spectrum of bikes, whether we need, you know, specialized women's bikes. But the flip side is that the entire industry is sort of slanted towards men coming into a bike shop in ways that bike shops very often aren't women friendly to begin with. So, at what, you know, where's that magic line where you sort of say, right, let's make this the kind of place that's inviting for women to come into this world, but at the same time come away with a bike they want, rather than.
A lot of men are intimidated in bike shops.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No question.
I used to work in one, and people would either come to me directly or push back. I mean, just touch me.
Oh, there are a lot. There are an awful lot of bike shops where I feel like I need to shave my legs in order to go in to be treated as a real customer. Yeah, exactly. Or no, well, what, rule 22. You can't take the cap. Well, you know, the cap must stay with the bike. You can't wear it off the bike. But yeah, exactly. I mean, I need to look the part, and it's.
Well, I thought we walked into Lululemon.
Sure.
Well,
What is it with Lululemon and their bias against men?
Roy once, but this was years ago.
You share a legs.
Ordered up a Copenhagen, and they said, you know, the two-wheelers, I'll go with the clenches. And inches. And this is sort of that, well, the train, you had to come up with training tires. Oh, okay, training tires. Training wheels, yeah, no problem.
In fact, I mean, my wife actually likes the place where I shop because when she goes in, they pay attention. And they listen to her and give her suggestions and they don't treat her like an inferior. And in fact, I've talked to a bunch of other guys, we all live in the same neighborhood and we all go to this one shop. And in fact, most of them have said that their wives like to go there because the guys who run the shop are sensitive enough and have their own families with wives and daughters that, you know, they treat women the way they would expect someone to treat the women in their life. And so the women in our lives feel comfortable going in there, and it's made a huge difference. And as a result, that bike shop gets a lot of traffic. You know, and I mean, the car companies figured out 20 years ago that the people driving a lot of the economic decisions in most households are women. And the bike companies are just starting, I think, to figure that out. And that's perhaps part of what's driving this kind of afterthought of women's bikes is they're starting to figure out that that the people in households who drive a lot of purchasing decisions are men, it's the women. And they're trying to capitalize on that, and they're failing miserably. And they'll get better at it, hopefully. But part of that is communicating with them too. Is to have women say to them, I don't want to put bike. Give me something real.
Well,
give me some options.
And I was down at Gage and DeSoto in Brooklyn about a month ago, and they do a lot of design work sort of behind the scenes in the cycling industry. And the number of women who come in sort of said, why can't I get a kit or bike? And sort of saying, give me ideas, give me plans, let me know what you need. You know, it just, you know, it's, I mean, there is sort of this larger breakdown in communication. I think sort of, you know, rather than sort of saying, here's the central problem, I think it's a series of fundamental flaws in how the bike industry functions. But also then, obviously, we were talking about this last night, actually. I mean, a larger industry, much of which is on the cusp of going underwater in general. I mean, not just the pro scene, but most bike building companies
building bikes is a hugely unprofitable business for the most part. So I think there's a real marketing challenge that they have. But I think the bike companies would be much better off, to your point, not marketing men's or women's bikes, and just having a line of bikes.
And different fits.
With different sizes. Like,
customized
Different sizes.
just have a range of sizes from small to big, and
different stems and different a range of components.
I think one of the other things that's really I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I think one of the other things that's really overlooked is, women's shorts. And I think, first of all,
and jerseys.
So one of the first things we did with Humanities was get an absolutely top-of-the-line women's short, right? And we sell almost none of them. I can't meet my minimum order, so I now have a huge inventory. The only thing I have inventory of is women's shorts, but really absolutely top-of-the-line chamois, because you need a women-specific chamois. That's one thing, because women and men are actually a little bit different. In case that's been missed, but and women don't like to have bib shorts generally because they don't like to get buck naked anytime they have to go to the bathroom on the road. So so shorts and a high-quality chamois, and other than that, the shorts are identical to the men's. And when Michelle finally got a pair of top-of-the-line cycling shorts, she's like, whoa, this is awesome, and all of a sudden the 12 and 14-hour rides are not an issue anymore, and there's no comfort problems. And I've never seen a top-of-the-line women's short in a bike shop.
I've never done a 12 or 14-hour ride. Didn't have comfort issues. I mean, come on, man.
Well, within reason, right? Within reason, but
you're right.
Yeah.
Well, but isn't part of the barrier too? It's a different threshold, not just women versus men. I would say, in my experience and the people I know, it's more of the financial cost. Like, I don't want to buy a bike or shorts. And I know a lot of people that just ride without all of that as well. So I think that's part of it. Maybe women are less likely to make that kind of investment. Like, I know lots of people committed to riding a bike, but not necessarily going into a bike shop and buying big shorts and all this stuff. Buy a bike, wear something that works. I don't know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's actually a lady in Seattle who opened a bike shop called Hub and Spoke, and she said, I talked to her right when she opened it. She said the exact same thing. Been riding a bike for 25 years, and I've never kidded up ever in my life. And this bike shop is all geared towards wearing comfortable clothes that you can ride a bike on. And so it's a great one, absolutely. It's different approaches to the sport, absolutely, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I think, again, in terms of, in spite of sort of this long, litany of rules and all kinds of things, I mean, the primary method of obeying the rules is to ride a bike.
Yeah.
It's not as though you must adhere to at least 25 of these before, or else you'll be pulled over and your tires will be slashed or anything. You're done off the bike. But rather precisely that notion that, and then, whether, how you see fit or how you choose, you can obviously cultivate a sense of style or appreciation or recognition or attention to the bike, but the first step obviously is getting people both on bikes and out on bikes, and again for a multiplicity of purposes as well. But whether it is a ride to work or whether it is sort of a leisure riding or family time or what have you, there are different ways that we can and do ride bikes, and whichever or all of which work for you, that's great. And there are a whole series of, I think, sort of personal political, environmental, health-related reasons for doing that. And it's get out and ride rather than. And this is one of actually the interesting features of the site. To circle all the way back again, is that there seems to be a notion that the rules are sort of almost a thou shalt not, rather than please come enjoy. And obviously, there's a focus on the sport and leisure element of road cycling specifically, but I mean there does seem to be a larger message of, while people might pick on one rule and say, what, I'm kicked out of the club, it really is more
get out and ride your bike.
Get out and ride your bike.
The whole idea is, do it more often.
And do it more often.
And more kinds of weather, and not just on Sunday afternoon.
Ross, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say something about, I work in a bike shop, and I deal with big bike manufacturers and I sell things. I'm also really obsessed with frame geometry, and I have had an interest in frame building. I've tried to get at it. And for the most part, especially in smaller sizes, the bikes really aren't any different. I mean, some manufacturers, like Strack, they have 3 geometries for their cargo road bikes: H1, H2, and H3. And there's men's H3, and then the bikes that they brand women's bikes are H3 bikes. There's no difference other than they stamp WSE on them.
Which means women's specific design. It is not.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But it's pure
In this case, we mean specific as
they'll do something like generic. There's a limit. You can't, at a certain point, you can't make a bike any shorter front to back, or else you're going to hit your front of your toe on the tire, right? So they'll do something. They'll change the seat tube angle, and when you look at the geometry chart, we'll say the top tube got shorter, so if you have shorter torso and shorter arms, you might think that makes a difference. But your seat is fixed in space. Changing that angle doesn't really. I mean, the frame.
Well, and I've had bikes where I had toe run issues, and I'm 5'10", so a woman who's 5'6", you're probably going to have toe run issues just because of the shrinking geometry, but the wheels stay the same size, and that's just an issue that shorter riders, a lot of whom are women, are going to have to address.
I'm 5'1" and I've never had such a. But I only ride a men's bike as well. Yeah, I've never had a men's. Well, I did once, but when I switched, it was.
And it depends on which bike and.
The geometry will affect overlap, but I think it has less to do with men and women. But Cervelo has an interesting approach. Once they get to that point where they can't make the bike swell enough anymore, they just go to a 650C wheel.
And that's the solution. And Cervelo, like a lot of other high-end sort of boutique manufacturers, they don't really do men's and women's bikes. They just have bikes.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the companies that do market a women-specific bike, they're mostly selling talking points. They're not selling a different bike, but they're able to add on, we shorten the head tube because of a female's geometry and different dimensions of their body. And that's all they're really doing. This is the same as other brands. They rebrand it, same product, but you have more talking points. As we all know, when we go to buy something, we want to hear what's great about it. So if you're trying to sell me, this Nestea, you don't just tell me, it kind of tastes like, like brisk or something like that. You just have a long laundry list of things you can talk about, and then the consumer will automatically fall into this mindset that, oh wow, this bike is so much better suited for me because the salesman just told me 10 great things about it. But if you look across on the men's side, you find a comparable bike has the same things, the same laundry list. But for some reason, consumers right now have this desire to be told that theirs is unique and specific to them.
It's kind of economics.
It's economics, and marketing, But I don't know. It's a hard challenge. It's a big problem. I don't know how you get around it necessarily, other than raising awareness and starting to work on it and being patient. And women who go into bike shops and say, I don't want a flowery jersey. Give me something real, and demand it and make a market for it. It's challenging. To convince a company to do anything if they're not going to make money on it, so especially in this economic climate, and I think that's one of the things to remember. And I've learned that we've been trying to set up some partnerships with bicycle manufacturers, and there's really no money in building bikes unless you're tracker specialized. So it is a very low margin business. So it's tough to say how should they spend the money. but consolidating to one line of bikes and just not making them pink and not making them, called, Vanquish or whatever, just, it's a great place to start. It doesn't hurt anyone and it helps everyone, so good stuff.
On the subject of the genders, how best could bike shops go about our communities such as Humanities as being more inclusive on group rides and bringing out a larger female population and mostly the men that show up?
I think one of the massive things that, first of all, for the most part, I really enjoyed our ride today, but for the most part, I hate group rides. Really, and I think that's part of the reason why women. I know that's why Michelle hates going on these group rides. Is that you get 3 guys on a group ride, and every hill they get to, they just from the very first one, they're gunning it and sprinting for this town line, and it's a kind of a testosterone fueled aggressive thing right from the beginning, and I think. There's certainly women that enjoy that, but I think there are also a lot of people, and myself as a man included, who a lot of the time just enjoy going out on a relaxed group ride and having that be a fun social activity where you're getting exercise as well. And I think, the golden rule is you put 2 guys on a bike next to each other up a hill, and you're going to start getting this thing going,
We wouldn't know anything about it.
We wouldn't know nothing about it. Like I said, I had a blast today, but that's that was an aggressive ride, and it started off with Michael saying, I envisioned today as just being a relaxed little jaunt around Hamilton or wherever, and it turned into whatever that longer road was with the rolling hills. It was it was a sprint up every one of those. And it was a ton of fun, but it wasn't a very inclusive thing, So it's that's something that as a community we have to stop. And it's idiotic anyway because it's not training. And we have to as a community just start. A race is a race. Training is training. A group ride is you make a promise about what the group ride is going to be like, and you stick to it, and then you'll get more and more people, not just women, but riders of all skills and abilities. They'll know what kind of ride they're getting into, and they'll join the ones that make sense for them, and they'll have a happier time.
And maybe this is the way to sort of wrap things up, but also tie everything together. Rule 43 is don't be a jackass. And there are elements of training properly, all kinds of things, and we all interpret that in different ways based on our priorities around the bike. But there is the notion that don't be a jackass implies be inclusive, be good company, enjoy the experience. And obviously there are life lessons here, like with many of the rules, but at the same time, in terms of being on the bike, there is that notion that the social aspect of riding on the bike, and indeed, and this is what in a lot of ways it's worked on the online community as well, is that it's not about me, it's about the sharing of the experience. That you don't have, one of the fascinating things, we haven't talked about this in conversation for your next visit, what's fascinating about the site and the community and the discussion online is that it's not about, let me post about me today, but rather it's responses to, it's people actually read the other posts, which is phenomenal. It's a listening forum or community rather than a screaming and shouting past each other kind of forum, which I think is fascinating. But in terms of not being a jackass, I think there's that notion of including people, making sure that this ride is one that is inviting to all comers. And obviously there are times when groups are stronger or weaker or want to go faster, and not being a jackass is making sure that you're situated in the right place as well, but finding an inviting space within the cycling community then becomes really valuable. One thing we haven't talked about, maybe we can finish with very quickly, is I understand the rules which have already gone viral are now going to go back to the printed page.
That's true. That's right. Yeah, we just finalized the agreement. Actually, I think the press release came out yesterday. But yeah, we're writing a book on the rules. It'll be basically, if you've read Need for the Bike by Paul Fernell, it'll be, I think, more, that's probably the most similar kind of book as to what we're doing, but essentially a bunch of essays on, it'll have all the rules in the book, but an essay for all the interesting ones, which is by no means all of them, but
85 out of 91?
85 out of 91. Yeah, I'll tell the Museo story again.
There you go, good.
But, yeah, so we're very excited about that. We're going to finish writing the book by the end of the year, and it's going to be published everywhere but the United States, just in time for the Tour de France. It's a British book publisher that we've got, and we're hoping that the book gets published in the U.S. then maybe a month later or so.
But have an in-sleeve with laminated highlights of all the numbers, so you put it in your back pocket and give out citations.
We were trying to get that.
A little sort of business card. You got a VCOG and a 14. Here you are, sir. It's
the marketing gimmick for that the publisher is going to do in London is actually they're going to have people in like officer uniforms with notepads issuing citations for rule violations.
Just to be clear, how many rules can you be in violation of and still be considered part of the group?
If you're getting on your bike, you're fine.
Well, we have to bring that up.
If you're out
It's
there,
gonna show a
you're
violation.
It's better if you're perfectly rule compliant. You were joking. You guys were cleaning your bikes and eliminating squeaks, but I did the same thing. I was like, there's no way I can show up here with a dirty bike. And
actually, on the record, and for the millions of viewers who will be watching this from the Illuminati site in no time, the first thing that happened is we pulled out of the driveway yesterday morning was that your bike let out the most ungodly squeak. That,
and it went away enough.
Which again, my pressure levels just sort of sank. I thought, okay, this will be all right. It's a really good beat, and I just thought, okay. So
yeah, the brakes. Yeah, they were school.
But if there, we'd love to have you back for a book tour stop in Hamilton. This time next year would be absolutely terrific. But please join me in thanking Strack.